Once again, we're back to talk about a console I talk about a lot on this channel, the SNES, and it's not going to be the last. In fact, there's probably going to be a few more in the near future, so buckle up, buckaroos! Although I have nothing but fond memories of the system, there's probably some things Nintendo would rather you keep in the dark recesses of your mind, like Woodsy Owl. That's 2 references to South Park in the intro. We're in rare form tonight, boys. Probably shouldn't have written this script while pre-drinking for St. Patty's. Oh well, with that being said, I'm your host 24Kevin, here for 24Kevintendo, and here's 10 things Nintendo wants you to forget about the SNES. Number 10, Nintendo wasn't planning on releasing a new system. Originally, Nintendo had no intention of making a new console, as they saw the NES as being a home standard, on par with the VCR and cassette players, and we all know how well those went. A new, better technology in the Sega Genesis came out, and the NES paled in comparison. Thanks to Sega's aggressive marketing campaign, Nintendo was basically forced to adapt and develop a new system. This wasn't the last time that Nintendo had to change plans due to Sega, which brings us to number 9, the third-party changes due to Sega. In our What Nintendo Wants You to Forget About the NES video, we talked about how Nintendo had a stranglehold on the market thanks to the contracts they had with third-party developers and their ludicrous policies. Since Sega had a completely new market, games were suddenly going cross-platform, and with the ability to develop solely for the Genesis, Nintendo was forced to change their policies, and although they still monitored releases closely, allowed for a lot looser publishing restrictions. Number 8, no hopers. With things reaching a fever pitch in the console wars with Nintendo and Sega taking shots back and forth at each other, both basically tried to smear each other as much as possible. Nintendo took this opportunity to take a shot at Sega in one of their most popular sequels, Donkey Kong Country 2. After beating the game, the player would be shown Cranky's video game heroes, prominently displaying Mario, Link, and either Yoshi or Diddy depending on how you did. But if you pay attention to the trash bin in the corner, there's a sign that reads, No Hopers. Next to that is the footwear of everybody's favorite blue hedgehog. Considering Nintendo has decided to put their differences with Sega behind and continue to publish their games, Nintendo would probably rather leave all sorts of shade in the past. Number 7, the SNES turns yellow. During the initial launch, Nintendo had a rather unique problem in which some of its plastic turned yellow. Now, contrary to popular belief, it had nothing to do with cigarette smoke. Nintendo mixed multiple flame-retarding chemicals into their plastic, which, when exposed to light and oxygen, caused the SNES to become a sickly yellow color. Now, Nintendo did rectify this mistake with later runs, but the SNES's look will always have that jaundiced look looming over its history. Number 6. The release caused the Japanese government to step in. So the NES was a pretty big deal back in the day, with the majority of homes in Japan having one. So it's no surprise the release of the SNES was met with a huge response. The initial shipment of 300,000 units sold out in a matter of hours, and this was on a Wednesday. The release, however, caused a massive disruption in local traffic and commerce. So much so that the Japanese government asked console makers to schedule future releases on weekends. Which is probably a good thing. I mean, can you imagine if Breath of the Wild and the Switch launched on a Wednesday? No one would get any work done for that week, and you probably wouldn't have a job at the end of it all anyways. Number 5. They were sued by Pixar over Uniracers. Nintendo just keeps winding up in court, don't they? Well, in 1994, Nintendo released a game called Uniracers, a high-speed racing game meant to show the SNES could handle games similar to Sonic. Well, 7 years before this game came out, Pixar released a short film called Red's Dream that starred a red unicycle. Seeing this as copyright infringement, Pixar took Nintendo to court and ultimately won, causing Nintendo to cease production of this game, which is why it only ever produced 300,000 carts, and why we'll probably never see this game released on the Virtual Console. Number 4. They shipped the console at night to avoid robbery. As we said, everything was crazy during the release, and the SNES had a lot of hype surrounding it. So much so that the system drew a lot of unwanted attention from the Yakuza, who were reportedly hijacking shipments and scalping them for a huge profit. To avoid this happening in the future, Nintendo decided to discreetly ship their units at night to avoid any unwanted attention. Between the government and the Yakuza, it's surprising the SNES even got off the ground. Speaking of the government, Number 3. Nintendo was in trouble with Congress. In 1993, Nintendo, and all video game companies, were brought under fire from Congress for promoting violence in video games. Led by Senator Joe Lieberman, Congress brought up how Nintendo was promoting hyper-violent games which were affecting the psyche of young children. Despite Nintendo's best efforts, it was thanks to their peripheral, the Super Scope, that made them an easy target, as this hunk of plastic looked like a giant bazooka. In the end, the hearing wound up bringing forth the ESRB rating system and caused Nintendo to do away with their censorship policies, which probably would have come in handy before. Number 2, the Mortal Kombat censorship. As some of you may remember, Mortal Kombat started as an arcade game in the early 90s, known for its over-the-top violence and gore. Nintendo, knowing how hot this IP was, decided to port the game to the SNES, but made changes to it. They decided to replace blood with sweat, dubbed fatalities finishing moves, and then changed those aforementioned moves to appear less violent as to maintain their family-friendly image. While this happened on Nintendo's end, Sega kept the whole game exactly the same, so when push came to shove, people preferred the non-filtered version, and the figure showed, with the Sega version of Mortal Kombat selling more than double the amount of the SNES version. After the ESRB ratings came out, Nintendo had no problem releasing the non-censored versions of Mortal Kombat 2 and 3. But by then, the word was out and the damage had been done. Nintendo had solidified themselves as the kiddie console. And the number one thing Nintendo wants you to forget about the SNES is the Sony deal. Well, Nintendo originally made a deal with Sony to develop a CD-ROM add-on for the Super Nintendo. However, far into development, Sony made its intentions known that were the add-on a success, it wanted to branch off and create its own devices. Nintendo already not happy with the contract negotiations and not wanting to create a rival in their own space. Hiroshi Yamauchi announced a deal with Philips to develop a CDI attachment instead. Eventually, Philips grew frustrated with the whole situation and pulled out of the hardware agreement, but Nintendo still owned their properties to Philips to make original games, and we all know how well those went. Sony learned from their experience with Nintendo though, and decided that a 16-bit system wasn't powerful enough and developed the 32-bit PlayStation, which became the first console to ship over 100 million consoles worldwide and launched Nintendo's new biggest competitor. And that's our list. Did any of those facts surprise you? Leave a comment down below and let me know what you guys thought. For everyone here at 24KevinTendo, I'm your host 24Kevin. I gotta go though. I gotta go work on more videos. And by work on more videos, I mean finish The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild so I can make more videos. See you guys next time. Thanks for watching. Bye!